to talk to you about contract management in Teams using Flow, the document creator, and the PowerApps AI Builder. So I'm all about integration. So for me, business integration of all of the tools. So I started life in SharePoint, which is my passion, and came to Office 365 through SharePoint, hence the nickname SharePoint Sharon, as you saw on the previous slide. But my real interest is in getting to value quickly, and Teams certainly helps to get us to that value for any business. So I'm going to show you how we've used a couple of tools, PowerApps and Flow, to build this use case out. So what we're looking for is a system that can quickly generate template-driven contract style documents, by which I'm talking about statement of works, NDA, anything along those lines, and use a template to fill that document, and then once that document has been signed, then use the PowerApps AI Builder to scan that document, to bring that into a SharePoint list, to then be able to automate the process of renewals, reminders, and that side of things, all hosted within a Teams environment. Now, the reason for hosting in Teams is that super collaboration. So coming from a SharePoint environment, the idea of surfacing your files within Teams is awesome, but to be able to have your apps next to that just takes it to the next level for me. So I wanted to show you how we've done some real business use cases around this. So let's dive in. So for us, this splits down into 4 steps. So firstly, we need to create the document. So we have a standard NDA or a statement of work, but within there we need to fill in certain legal parts, a company name, a contact detail, etc. And we need to do it quickly. So the usual use case is that first of all I have to find the most recent template, then I have to fill it in with various details, which I probably don't know. Various different people have got to collate. Then once the document is done, we've then got to send that to the client. So the idea is to get the system to create the document for us from a SharePoint list. The document then iterates around the various people involved in the process of getting that contract signed and never survives first contact with the customer. As anybody knows who's ever sent out an NDA or a statement of work, there are various iterations. So we've very much separated the create and the complete sections, because we know this iterate part in the middle can go on for days, weeks, months, and sometimes contracts never ever get signed. So then we have the completion stage when the contract has been signed, and usually it's been scanned and it's coming back to you as a PDF. And then the renew section, so when we're looking to start renegotiating the whole process again. So really, in terms of the technical functionality, we're looking at 3 parts. So create the contract using SharePoint, so that's the flow part. Create a PowerApps to read in the signed documents, and then to monitor the expiry. And again, that's something that we can use Teams and we can use Flow for. So what I've done is I've created a bunch of videos, because obviously, as my mic showed you there, things go wrong when you're in live demo. So I'm just going to play these videos for you for each of these separate parts and talk you through. There's no audio on them. It's just to make sure that I can show you the key parts and I can talk that through while it's happening. So as you can see, we're in a vanilla team here. So we have our team already set up. And what we're going to do is we're going to add a couple of places that we need to help the initial functionality to work. So we're going to jump into SharePoint, go to the root of that SharePoint site and create a document library. So the first thing we need to do is to bring in the template document. So let's create a templates document library, and then we're going to upload the template into that space that we're going to use. So I'll just use the one, which is my statement of work, and I'll show you that statement of work in Word. So this needs to be a Word document for this to work. So if we show you that, what you should see is that this has a very definite front cover sheet. There's a good reason for that. I'll explain it a bit more in depth later. So what we have is a summary sheet on the front telling us who everybody is that's part of the process. And then as we go through, you'll see this is all the legal side of things and the formatting that you need for these kinds of documents, where there's information to be filled in as well. So to get the template ready for use within Flow, we need to set it up so that Flow knows where to put the data. What I'm showing you here is how to add the developer tab in Word to be able to dip into design mode and then be able to pick a piece of text and label that. So basically creating the areas of text that we want Flow to fill in for us. So what I've done is I've already created this particular document with all of the items that we want to pre-populate, just for speed. So then what I now need to do is to create a location to put that document once we've completed it. So the process will pick up the template, fill it in with the data that we're going to give it, and then put it in a created files location. So let's create our created files. And I would always say with Flow especially, it's always better to create your assets before you go into Flow to create them, to connect to them. So what we're doing here is this is the list that we're going to create for the contract details to be put into. So our users will come into this particular list and add the data for the specific company that we're going to do the deal with. So let's put in some fields. We've got company name, and I'm just going to use here some basic details that are single lines of text. So just to demonstrate how the process runs. If we want to do more complex stuff, then we can do that later. So now I'm going to dip into Flow and start building the process out. Now we need a SharePoint trigger. So what we're going to do is on this one, we'll do it when an item is created. In real life, what we actually did with this is we had a tick box to say when we were ready for the document to be created, because sometimes you don't have all of the details at the point that you want to set that up. So we've said when a document is created in the contract details, when an item is created in the contract details list, we're going to come in here and we're going to populate a Word template. Okay, now this is a premium feature, so watch out on licensing, a bit of a caveat for everything these days since October. And we're going to connect to the templates location that we created in SharePoint just a moment ago. Now the interesting thing here is that the file explorer, as I'm showing you, is connected to the folder, not the dynamic list. So that's a little bit different for anybody who's used to Flow. Once we pick the template, Flow automatically goes and grabs all of those developer tags that we set up within the document. And so now what we can do is from the data from the when an item is created that we've picked up, we can go and put that data into the Word template. So if we'd have had way more fields, they would have turned up on the right there. But again, I'm just showing you for demonstration purposes, we can build the solution out later. Okay, so once we've populated that Word template, we now have it in memory. We have a document that's got some information in it. We now need to effectively create that document in our document library. So what I'm showing you here is there are actually many different types of create document. If I just retype that, you'll see that when we create a file, there's file system, there's Azure, there's OneDrive. So specifically, we need to pick the SharePoint one to get this right. And again, we need to give it the SharePoint location to be able to save that document down. We've got the folder path, and I think I do show you here that there is the ability to go into subfolders as well. So if we click on the folder path, we can see all of the folders in that particular site. So we're going to create our created files, but we could have gone further down. Okay, so within created files, we could have drilled right down into any subfolders if that's where you want to put things. So maybe you've got a pattern with the client name in it, etc. So the file name that we're going to create, we're going to go with company name - date created. And we're going to put docx on the end. Now it's really important, hence the highlighting there, to put the docx on the end. And actually, in recording this demo for you, I did actually come across the bug that I'm going to talk about actually highlighted itself. So I will show you that in a second. So the file content is going to be the content from the one above, which is the populated Microsoft Word template. So we're putting that information into the file that we're creating. And that's as simple as it is. So we're now going to save that flow and go and execute it. And I'll show you what happened. Interestingly, you can see it here. So in this create file, you'll notice, and I didn't while I was recording it, that the .docx on the end of the document in that item has actually vanished. Now this happens all the time and I don't really know why. So this is why you always go back and check your flow before you run it. I didn't spot it, but I will do in a minute. But I thought I would leave that in because, well, mistakes happen. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump over to the SharePoint list. and create an item to show you that that file will be created. Now we're going to do it within Teams because that's where it's going to live. So we're going to put in a tab for the document library for the created content so that we can see the created files when they happen. Probably should have renamed that. I think I do later. And we're also going to put in a connection to the SharePoint list so that we can have the users creating those contract details in the SharePoint list. Okay, logically, I think the SharePoint list would come before the document library, but okay. So new user is going to come in here. We've only got their title, which is mandatory, and we're going to put in the company name, which is the field that we used within the flow. And we should see that turn up in the file name. So we've put that information into the list, and nothing has turned up in the document library, but that's probably because we needed to refresh it. But let's go and have a look at the flow and see what happened. If we refresh this page, we should see that we have a succeeded flow execution. And if we drill down into the details, we can see that we've got Joe's Fish Limited turned up in the body. So we know it picked up our parameters correctly from the list. And in the create file, we can see that Joe's Fish is right there in the file name, and we've got the path correct. So let's nip back and do a refresh, and hopefully that document will be there. Brilliant. So what you can see here is that's not a Word document. Okay, so that tells me immediately that the docx has vanished from the flow. So we'll just nip back and fix that. Again, I thought I'd leave that in because it does happen a lot, and it's useful to know that that's all that's happened. So pop back in and just put that docx on the end again. Then we'll run the scenario again once we've saved. From within Teams. And hopefully everything goes our way, but it actually doesn't. But again, I thought I'd leave it in to show you how you can debug what it is that you're doing. So you can see that we do have a Word document, which is great. But once we go into the Word document and we start looking for Bob's Flowers Limited, it's not there. Okay, so what I did is I created this very quickly for demo purposes for you from a document that already has a great deal of tags in it. And what I didn't do was go back and name each label correctly. So what I've done is ended up with a document that has company name in it a couple of times. So what I'll do is I'll go back to the flow. And I've put in here the company name in the locations that it needs to be in the various places in the document. Now, ideally, you would have a repeating field, etc. But again, remember, this is just for demonstration purposes. So we're just going to run that one more time. And this time you'll see from the contract details, if we add a company in, just as test data, then we should see Sharon's test company get populated within our Word document. And there it is. We're so confident it's going to work that we've just jumped straight to it, open the document, and Sharon's test company is where it needs to be. Okay, so note to self, name things correctly. And you can see that it's also populated in the other areas of the document because I added it into all locations. So that really is the first part of the process. So here we are, we're in Teams, and our users have been able to generate a document from base data. Now, the nice thing is, like I say, you could have triggers on there of when the flow runs so that you could be collecting this data if you don't know the company number for a company that you're going to do business with, or you need to find out the registered company address, etc. You can be filling in those details as and when you get them. So that's really if I just skip forward to the next slide, that's really the first part of our process. So then moving on, we need to now create the Power App. So what's happening right now is that document that we've created has gone off to Sharon's Test Company or Bob's Fish Limited, and they are busy going around the loop of getting that document changed and getting that document signed off. So we then get to a point where we've come back to the process. We've got a document that's come back again, and we now need to read that document in. So the first thing that we're going to need is a document library to store the signed documents. So we need one of those so that we can very easily drag that in from email or save that down to the Teams location to be able to use in the document scanner. So we're just going to create that document library, and then we're going to add that into a tab so that we can see those documents, or again, can drag them in if we've got them on the desktop. So we're creating quite a few tabs here. Oh, just picked the wrong team. One moment, I'll just add in the tab correctly. There it is. So there's our signed contracts. So we now have that available for the team to be able to see as well as a document library. We'll give it a name as we add it to the tab structure this time. Okay. So now we need to create the Powerup. Small pause there. I'm not quite sure what I was doing. I was clearly wanting to show you something, but I'm not quite sure what. So within PowerApps, we have the AI Builder. Now, the AI Builder comes with various different types of AI Builder pattern that you can create. And I'm showing you those here. So there's form processing, object detection, prediction, and text classification. We're going to use the form processing. And as you see at the top there, I've put a trial on this environment so that we can show you this. So this is now a premium feature, and you need to go and buy a bundle of credits to be able to use this. So as I'm showing you there, we simply start to create a model. And I put this in an environment because this is still in preview. You do need this on a US environment at the moment to be able to see it. So what I'm going to do is within the model, I'm off to find my contracts folder to share with the model the documents that I want to be analysing. So these are full copies of statements of works or NDAs. They all have that summary sheet on the front, and these were all created using the flow. Now what happens is you need, I think, a minimum of 5 documents to be able to start the model. Is that we have to put those documents into the system and then instruct it to do the analysis. Now this is as you can see in the top right there, it is analysing. I'm busy moving my mouse so that you know I didn't pause this, just to show you how quick this can be. Now there's a very good reason why I picked this format of document and why I have the summary sheet on the document itself. Because as you saw further down within the document, where it's just sort of saying the company name in a sentence or in that legal construct where we've perhaps got company number, the model can't pick up that individual piece of information. So what the AI Builder is looking for is to be able to map in almost a JSON format the classification of the field and its content. So that's why I picked to do a summary sheet on the top, because as you can see, what it's done within the model is it's picked out only the summary sheet. It hasn't looked at the rest of the data, and it's showing me the areas with the dotted line that can become fields that it will read from. So you can do select all, but I picked all of these so you can see them turning up on the right hand side. These are fields that the model will look at. So what I've said is all of these will appear in every document. They'll be available to the model to be able to read. And as you can see, as I've added them, the top one, for example, is 2, because that's what I've put on the left hand side. So if I'd have put company name there, then that's what it would have put. So what's happening now is we need to train the model. So we hit train at the bottom. Now, interestingly, you used to sit and wait for this to train, but now if you hit go to model, it just takes you straight to the screen that shows you that that is yet to be published and is still in training mode. So effectively, the next step, oh, it does show you over on the right hand side, it shows you how the model is used. So it's available in PowerApps and Flow. It shows you the fields that we selected and a bit of a preview. We could use the quick test, but let's head straight to publishing and get this model available for us to use within a PowerApp. So once we've published the model, what we'll be able to then do is to create a PowerApp using that model. Again, 2 ways to go around it. You could create a PowerApp from scratch, or once this completes, and it did take a moment, so I did just pause it there for you, we get the Use Model button, and we can then go and create a new app from here. And it effectively does exactly the same thing. It's just a quick shortcut to jump you to that. It hasn't already picked the model for you. We still do need to make that connection. So we're creating a Canvas app from blank, essentially. So it's exactly the same window. So we're going to create that app to be able to be surfaced in the Microsoft team. We're going to use the tablet format just to give us a bit more space. You could use the phone format, but I find that a bit large and a bit oversized within the Microsoft Teams interface. So the tablet app, I think, is a decent fit. So while creating this app, it's just getting everything together in the background for us. We can very quickly add in the model that we've just built on the insert screen, or on the insert tab, on the AI Builder preview, and we're going to pick the forms processor. So it's going to give us the option of the models that are available. There should be our new model there. And again, another little hint and tip here, before we bring the data out into fields to show you what's in that document, we will need to run the analyze. So I'll show you, because it's important that you see how this happens. So we're going to use a text input, again, good reason for it. So we're going to allow the document to be read, but not just accept the document input. So as you can see here, I'm trying to query the forms processor, but it's not showing up for me in the auto text, which means it's not ready, it's not initialized yet. So my workaround for this is if we go into play mode on the app, and then actually analyze a document. What this seems to do is initialize the model. Now, it could just be me. Maybe you do have to wait a little while for all of that to initialize. I'm not a very patient person. So I find coming in here and doing the analyze and then going back to the model then allows the field to be able to pick up that model as a source of data. So now when we start typing, we'll find that that forms processor is available to us. If I can type it correctly, form processor. So what we do with the text input is we say from the form processor, we need to go and grab the fields that have been returned, which actually you have to put the form content and then the fields, and then pull out the particular field. So this is the names that we put against each of those tags. And just to show you why you should label them correctly, I'm trying to guess here what it was called. Company, no, if you remember, we called it to. Okay, so you can see that from the data I analysed, company 1 was in fact the company name. So we're going to repeat this process just using copy and paste to bring in the other fields. Now, I'm not going to show you all of the fields that we brought out in that document. Obviously I could, but let's just put 3 or 4 on here so that they make sense. And as you can see, because I copied and pasted, another tip, I just need to change the value at the end. So on that one, I've picked contact. If I go into this one and click within it, I can change that to maybe the role or the type. And then I think the last one I do is role. And that just gives us a little bit of data. So that means that if I show you the analysis again, there we go. By using the play button, we can just see that the model is getting the data live just from one of the other documents. So it doesn't have to be one of the documents that you've trained on, although obviously you can use those again. So all documents that come in the new format will now be able to be read. So again, the reason that we put this as input fields is to be able to change this. So if you've got a dodgy PDF scan and you're not quite sure that the data is actually being read correctly, you can have the paper copy in front of you and say, actually, no, that's got an S on the end, or it's not quite brought through the value that I was expecting. Maybe it's got a foreign character. So then we're going to have a save button, and we're going to do a patch into the SharePoint list. So again, we haven't created a SharePoint list, so we do need to jump out of the Power App and just go and create that SharePoint list to put the data into. So we've got the signed contract where the document will live, but we now need a list to hold the contract data. So this is the live data that came back once we finally got it signed. Now, you could say, hang on a minute, we already have a list with this data in from when we created the document, but as I said, that's likely to change through the process of getting a document signed off, at least dates, if not contacts or any of the other data. So here we're just setting up a SharePoint list, again, with just single lines of text to throw that data into. So we're going to pop role in and contact and somewhere company name and also type of document. So let's go back and add in a couple more fields. So we want the document type, because obviously we want to have various different types of contracts in a list so that we can do some analysis on the types of contracts we're doing, or we don't want to keep creating lists. Ideally, like I say, your flow in the first case would have had maybe an if statement to say if type of document is statement of work, then use this template, or NDA, use that template. So again, this process can be built out to be as complex as you want it to be, or as all-encompassing, so that you only have the one process for everybody in the organisation. So having created the SharePoint list, we now need to come back to the Powerup and connect it to SharePoint. So we're going to pick the SharePoint connector, tell it to connect to the cloud. I think I do go back and grab the URL of the site, but you don't actually need to, because it's going to populate it down the bottom for us. I'm just very impatient. So you'll see as I go back, it's already populated them at the bottom. So I could just pick this one and it would do the same job. So I'm going to pick the contract data, signed contract data, so we know this is associated with a signed document that's been scanned, and we've used the app to analyze it once it's come back into the business. So we can see that that data connection has been established. We can now patch directly into that data. For anybody who's not particularly technical on the Powerup side of things, patch is a fancy word for save or update. So we need to patch into the signed contract data. We use the defaults just in case there is a default field that we want to set, and we then use a JSON format, Mr. Comma, to be able to save that data down. So this is just the process of me saving that data, working out what the fields are called. So as you can see, I'm now going through. Best practice is always to name your fields in a Powerup. So I'm just going through and naming them so that it makes sense, so that the patch statement that I do end up writing doesn't have text input 1.3 or 1.2, because that makes no sense. It's always much better to have readable code. So we're just naming all of the fields so that we know what we're doing. And then once we've named those fields, we'll be able to have a relatively readable patch statement. Again, it's not always just the fields that are in the Powerup that you need to name sensibly. They're obviously the fields that you've got in SharePoint. And I think as I go through this process, you'll see that I identify that I'm not quite sure what a field is called, and I do change it a couple of times. But again, I thought I'd leave this in here for you to be able to see, that process of going through and setting up that patch statement. Once we've got the patch statement, once the analysis is complete on that document, and the fields have been populated, we'd be able to submit that straight to the SharePoint list. Again, if that information has come across badly in the analysis because the model couldn't quite read it, we'll be able to alter that and send it. Which is why this patch statement is looking here, as you can see, we're looking at the company field rather than the output straight from the AI Builder. If we wanted to, we could patch the data directly from the analysis and not show it on the screen, but in real life we tend to find that that data is going to need to be changed, or somebody perhaps has misspelt something on the form. We don't want to carry that through into the contract data, even though it's potentially on the live contract. So once we've got all of the fields that we want to patch into SharePoint, apologies, we can then go about running a test and being able to save this on one of those documents. So I'm just going to scoot that forward a little bit because it looks like I have a moment with the patch statement. Okay, so there you can see, I think there's just one more to go in, that we are building out that patch statement to be able to, and you see as we've put those in, it highlights all of the content in there for us. So let's just move the video on. And we can see that we're back to the SharePoint list. Oh goodness, I really did struggle with that. Apologies. Okay, so we're doing some analysis. We've just put a new document in. And we've got new information. When we hit the save button, that's then gone grey, so we know that wrote back to the SharePoint list. So we could have all bunch of transitions on that button. You know, ideally, once that document has been submitted, we wouldn't let it be submitted again if it's got a reference number. And so there's many ways that we can build the solution out to be completely robust. And what we're just showing you here is that we can analyze the data. And this one, we're going to change the data to the top man. And then we'll have a look in the SharePoint list and just see that that did in fact come through as the altered data. Okay, so what we now have is the application to scan into the document. So even if we didn't have the first part of the process, we could now scan in documents and get them added to our signed contract data list. So this is just publishing the app and then making sure that that app is shared so that we can add it into the Teams tabs. So let me just move that on a little bit. This app was created in a separate environment to give us the AI builder, so it doesn't show up in the initial search that's done in here. And again, I left that in for you just to show that it not only does it have to be saved, but you do actually have to perform a search for it if it's not in the default container. So don't worry if your Power App doesn't show up to be able to be added to Teams. So let's just move that on a little bit. And you can see that we've added that. So now that we have added the Power App to Teams, so we now have the ability as the end user to go in and look at live data and to bring in those contracts once they've been signed. We now need to do something about that once those documents have come in. So on this one, you can see that we've got the 3 types of data that we analysed there, and those have all come in. So what we're going to show you on this one is the flow, basically, to do an announcement. So what we're going to do is a really simple announcement, but we're going to do it to a separate channel in the team. So once we've got everything set up, we're going to go into flow and we're going to say, actually, we only want to look at this on a monthly basis. So maybe these contracts are, you know, not something that we want to very frequently monitor, but once a month we need to know if one's going to expire. So we're going to nip in and put in a flow with a recurrence of a month. So every month this will spin up. It will get items in that SharePoint list. Again, to minimize the impact of that, we could say items that are marked X. So we could have they do or don't have a renew period or a new renew requirement. And we're going to do a for each on these. And this is just to demonstrate that if you want a for each, you actually have to look for a condition or a control that is a condition. So what we do is we put in a condition and we say for each of the items that we've picked up in that get items statement, we're looking for the expiry value, which I've been and added to the list, to be less than a month from today. So we're going to say less than or equal, and put in an expression to say that this is going to be from today's date. So we're going to do an add days to UTC now, which is now, and we're going to add 30 days. So we're going to say anything from today or 30 days plus today. So anything that is less than or equal to that, we want to send a reminder, or we want to let people know that that's expiring shortly. So we're going to add an action, and we're going to do a Teams action to be able to put that in the channel. A couple of ways we could do this. We could have gone and got the email address from the team channel, and we could have sent an email to it. We have adaptive cards, we have an awful lot now. So what we're going to do is we're just going to do one of the preview ones, which I'm looking for here. Here it is. And we're going to do the post to a channel preview action. And what that'll do is it lets us pick the channel, pick the team and the channel that we want to put that message in, and then we can put it in whatever format we like. So we'll just use a little bit of HTML to say that something's getting old. So we're going to put in just an ahref and then find the link to the item, so that should a user see this message, they'll be able to click on it and go straight to it. Again, you could build this out in so many ways, but what we're doing here is just showing you how to pull that data out real quick. So we're going to put that in our ahref statement, and we're just going to say click here or check it out. And then we're going to save this flow and run some tests on it. So what this will do is once a month it will pick up that data and it will go and check it. So we're just going to run a test, and again I was just going to show you here, I'm not sure I do, yes I do, that as we saved that flow it actually ran. So we're now going to rerun the original run using the previous data, and we're going to perform that test. So it's now going to have a look, and if it's got any items that are due to expire, and amazingly I did put one in there with an expiry date, I think it was the Microsoft one, it's now going to give us a notification. So we now have a notification within the team, and like I say, we've done this in a separate channel just to show that you can. So maybe the same team that's doing the creation and the scanning of the documents isn't the team, or isn't the channel that's being actively monitored for alerts, that you want a very collective point that you're going to see these notifications. So we've just put that in a separate channel just to demonstrate that that's possible. Okay, so then if we don't actually do it, we don't go back to the Power App and show you all of this in oh, we do. Okay, so what we've done is we've created all three scenarios. Whoops. All three scenarios where within the Teams environment we have tabs that can do the creation of the document from data. So we've got the data tab, we've got the document that's created, we've got a tab that has the Power App, which I realised I never showed you. I'll nip back and show you that. So you can do that scanning directly within Teams, and we then have that data coming to another list. We've then got reminders in a different channel to say that something is coming to an end, which is the same as my presentation. So that just about covers everything. I will just nip back and find the page that shows you it coming through into the Teams environment, because I think it's important. It's going to be right at the end of this one. Here we go. While I'm doing that, I will also flick to the chat on my phone and see if anybody has raised a question, but quite happy to take questions. Okay, it's not playing. So this is a user who is able to come into the Power App, and we're going to scan a document. Let me just move that on a smidge. There we go. So this is actively scanning a document from within the Teams environment itself. So obviously this could look way nicer than this. We wouldn't leave the users with such a bare and ugly slide. So again, we can pick a different one if we've already scanned that one in, and you can do some logic on, if I've already got the document, don't save those details twice. And when we save that, we should be able to flick into the other view, which I've clearly added as the signed contract data, and we now have a list that has that signed contract data in, which in itself is super valuable. Okay, flick to Teams and see if we've got any questions.